They marooned the human janitor in the Unsurvivable scrapyard. The High Commandant of the Imperial Starfleet sat behind a polished obsidian desk, sipping a cup of spiced nebula-tea, waiting for the red indicator light to flicker on his console. It was a formality, really. 3 standard days ago, Cadet General Vrax had initiated Protocol 88 Delta, affectionately known among the upper echelons as Project Bastard. The parameters were simple. Take a problematic, insubordinate subject, strip them of all military gear, and drop them unceremoniously into the scrapyard of Sector 9. Sector 9 wasn't just a junkyard, it was a localized gravitational hazard. A chaotic wasteland of discarded dreadnought carcasses, unexploded ordnance, toxic fuel pockets, and crushing radiation waves that liquefied organic tissue within 72 hours. No one survived Sector 9. It was the Empire's favorite way to quietly solve disciplinary problems without the messy paperwork of a court-martial. The subject this time wasn't even a cadet. He was a human. A low-tier maintenance worker named Arthur, assigned to clean the grease traps in the lower mess halls until he made the unfortunate tactical error of telling a fleet admiral that his uniform made him look like a startled peacock. "Any telemetry from the drop zone yet?" Vrax asked without looking up, his 4 upper mandibles clicking in idle amusement. His adjutant, a scrawny avian clerk named Kale, tapped nervously at his data slate. "Negative on active telemetry, High Commandant. The atmospheric acid storms and electromagnetic interference are entirely blocking our long-range drones. However, automated life sign vitals suggest the subject's adrenaline spiked dramatically about 12 hours ago, followed by a total cessation of panic state hormones." Vrax chuckled, swirling his tea. "Ah, the acceptance phase. Soon the radiation will finish the job. File the casualty report under industrial training accident and fetch my afternoon schedule." 12 hours earlier, 5 kilometers down in the crushing, sulfur-choked abyss of Sector 9, Arthur was currently wiping a smear of synthetic grease off his forehead with the back of a stained jumpsuit sleeve. He was not panicking. Panicking didn't clear out clogged waste pipes, and it certainly didn't weld titanium plates together. "Okay," Arthur muttered to himself, squinting through his cracked welding goggles at the towering, rusted monument of obsolete alien engineering looming before him. It was the Vandermeer, a decommissioned dreadnought from the First Hegemony War, discarded 2 centuries ago. Its bow was caved in, its warp core was a jagged, melted paperweight, and its interior corridors were currently home to 3 species of aggressive, acid-spitting scrapworms. To the Imperial Starfleet, it was a tomb. To Arthur, who had spent 12 years fixing antiquated plumbing on rusted cargo scows before being drafted into this absurd military, it was a 3-bedroom fixer-upper with great structural bones. "Right then," Arthur muttered, grabbing a heavy-duty plasma torch that he had managed to hotwire using a discarded battery array and a coil of copper wiring. "Let's see what these space nerds left in the basement." What followed over the next 60 hours defied every known law of Imperial naval architecture, standard physics, and basic common sense. A phenomenon human engineers secretly referred to as Project Bastard logic. Taking whatever garbage was lying around, duct taping it to a prayer, and making it run at 300% efficiency out of pure, unfiltered spite. Arthur didn't try to repair the ship's hyper-advanced, impossibly fragile antimatter matrix. Instead, he ripped it out entirely, dumped 10 tons of unrefined industrial plasma coolant into the cavity, and rigged a crude, oversized diesel hybrid turbine salvaged from an ore hauler's emergency escape pod. When the scrapworms tried to attack him, he didn't call for tactical backup. He fed them compressed yeast mixed with high-explosive engine cleaner until they violently detonated, then used their tough, chitinous hides to patch a gaping hull breach in Bulkhead 4. He needed a navigation computer. The original command deck was fried. So, Arthur salvaged the primary processor from an automated snack-dispensing kiosk he found floating in a nearby cargo wreck, hacked the subroutines with a handheld diagnostic pad, and wired it directly into the dreadnought's manual steering yoke, which he fashioned out of an old atmospheric tractor's tractor beam lever and 2 bicycle handbrakes. By hour 71, the monstrosity was awake. It didn't hum with the pristine, quiet purr of an Imperial cruiser. It roared. It rattled. It coughed thick plumes of black, unrefined exhaust into the toxic atmosphere of Sector 9, sounding like an intergalactic tractor trailer rolling down a gravel road with a broken muffler. Back in the pristine, ivory-pillared command center of the Imperial Academy, the red indicator light finally flickered on. Vrax lowered his teacup, sitting up straight. Ah, the casualty confirmation, finally. Put it on the main holoscreen, Kale. Let us review the log so we can close the file. Kale tapped his console, routing the long-range sensor sweep to the central viewing dais. Pulling up visual now, sir. Automated recovery drones report 0 human life signs remaining in the drop. The clerk stopped dead. His beak dropped open. The holoscreen flickered through static, clearing away the swirling dust of Sector 9 to reveal the drop zone. The crater where the human had been dropped was gone. In its place stood a 5-kilometer-long titan of jagged, welded scrap metal, mismatched armor plates, and glowing orange induction coils. A massive, hand-painted sign scrawled in bright yellow industrial caution paint stretched across its battered bow. Want a tow? Before Vrax could even process what he was looking at, a deafening, bass-heavy roar, the distinct sound of a 1,000-liter diesel turbine redlining on pure plasma moonshine, shattered the atmospheric audio sensors across the entire Academy. The scrap warship didn't glide forward with graceful anti-gravity tech. It lurched violently upward, tearing through the upper cloud layers like a brick thrown through a stained glass window. "High Commandant," Kale shrieked, his feathers flying in every direction as his console began to spark and smoke under a massive telemetry overload. The subject is not dead. He's commandeered a Class 4 dreadnought carcass, and he's locking weapons systems onto our orbital docks. Weapons systems, Vrax sputtered, flying out of his chair. What weapons systems? That was an empty hull. He wired 3 automated mining lasers and a salvaged mass driver to the snack bar processor. Sir, and he's hailing us on an open-frequency military channel. With a sharp click, the bridge's main audio system overrode itself, filling the pristine, silent command hall with the unmistakable sound of heavy rock music playing over a glitchy intercom, followed by a calm, gravelly human voice. "Attention, Imperial Academy. This is Arthur. Just letting you know the plumbing down in Sector 9 is all cleared out. Also, your front gate is sitting right in my blind spot, so if you could go ahead and move your fancy little flagship out of my driveway, I'd really appreciate it. I've got places to be." The pristine, ivory-pillared silence of the Imperial Academy command hall was utterly shattered. Alarms wailed in a frantic, rising 2-tone screech as the facility's automated defense grids registered an unauthorized, 5-kilometer-long mass of unregistered scrap metal hurtling directly toward the inner orbital platform. High Commandant Vrax stood frozen on his raised obsidian dais, his 4 upper mandibles twitching erratically as the heavy bass notes of human rock music vibrated through the floor plates. "De-energize the atmospheric shields," Vrax roared, his voice cracking with sheer, unadulterated panic. "Scramble the interceptor wing. Do not let that trash heap dock with the station." "Sir, we can't," Clark Kale shrieked, frantically batting at his smoking control console as warning glyphs cascaded down the screen in blinding sheets of crimson. Our defense grids are calibrated for energy signatures and phase shields. His hull is made of 300 different types of mismatched scrap metal, lead-lined plating, and compressed asteroid slag. The targeting computers don't even know what they are looking at. They think he's a rogue moon. Before Vrax could bark another order, the main viewing screen flickered violently. The satellite feed zoomed in on the terrifying, glorious monstrosity that was Arthur's newly minted warship. It was a terrifying violation of every aesthetic and engineering standard the hegemony held sacred. Mismatched reactor cowlings protruded from its flanks like rusted ribs. Its forward bow was patched with the glowing, chitinous armor plating of mutated scrapworms, and trailing behind its massive, coughing diesel hybrid exhaust ports was a thick, billowing plume of greasy black smoke that smelled faintly of scorched synthetic oil and ozone. At the helm of this chaotic titan, Arthur sat comfortably in a repurposed dentist's chair that he had bolted directly into the command deck floor. He wore a stained mechanic's jumpsuit, held a lukewarm cup of synthetic coffee in one hand, and used his left foot to casually tap a bicycle pedal that controlled the ship's emergency starboard thruster. He leaned forward, squinting into the long-range sensor pickup that was broadcasting straight back to the Academy's main bridge. "Hey, pointy heads," Arthur's voice boomed through the master comms, amplified by a salvaged megawatt PA horn wired into the ship's bow. "I tried to use your intercom button, but one of your little cadet lackeys stuck a security seal over it, so pardon the noise." Vrax lunged toward the master communication console, his face flushed an angry shade of iridescent purple. "Insolent wretch, you are standing on Imperial property. You are piloting an unregistered hazardous hulk in a restricted military zone. Stand down immediately, or we will atomize you where you float." A short, loud slurp echoed through the comms as Arthur took a sip of his terrible coffee. "Atomize me," Arthur repeated, a slow, lazy grin spreading across his stubbled face. "Chief, you tried to drop me in a radiation sink with 3-day survival rations and 0 tools because I told your admiral his uniform made him look like a plucked pelican. Then you gave me a 2-century-old dreadnought carcass full of spare parts and a vending machine computer." Arthur pointed a grease-stained thumb over his shoulder toward the massive, jury-rigged mast driver strapped to the top deck. "You guys really need to stop leaving your garbage around where a bored human can get to it. Do you have any idea what you can build with a plasma torch, 3 crates of industrial yeast, and 72 hours of absolute, uninterrupted alone time?" "I don't care what you built," Vrax screamed, slamming his fist onto the console. "Security, vaporize him." "Yeah, about that," Arthur interrupted, his tone dropping from casual to deadpan serious. "That snack bar processor I hacked, it's currently wired into your station's primary automated docking clamps, specifically the ones holding your personal flagship to the upper tether." Vrax stopped cold, his multifaceted eyes widened in horror. You didn't." "Oh, I definitely did," Arthur chuckled. He pressed his foot down hard on the bicycle pedal. Deep in the void outside, the 5-kilometer scrap warship gave a deafening metallic groan. Its massive industrial tractor-beam lever pulled back with brutal manual human force, locked into place. With a thunderous clang that shook the foundations of the entire Imperial Academy, Arthur's patchwork Titan didn't dock. It grabbed the edge of the station's primary structural ring, spun itself around on an improvised axis, and used the momentum to effortlessly fling the High Commandant's pristine, gold-plated luxury cruiser completely out of its docking bay and into a decaying orbit around Sector 9 gravity well. "There," Arthur said brightly over the comms, giving a casual 2-finger salute to the camera. "Now your driveway is clear. I'm heading out to grab some lunch. Tell the Admiral I said hi." The transmission cut dead. On the bridge of the Imperial Academy, absolute silence reigned. High Prefect Vrax stared blankly at the empty docking berth on the screen, his career, his dignity, and his pristine flagship slowly tumbling toward the acid clouds below. The 5-kilometer monstrosity of welded steel, scrapworm chitin, and diesel hybrid turbines didn't accelerate with the smooth, silent glide of an Imperial cruiser. It didn't whisper through the stars on antimatter currents. It left with a concussive, window-rattling kaboom that sounded like an interstellar freight train blowing its boiler in a copper tunnel. A thick, greasy plume of black exhaust bloomed behind the hull, mixing with unrefined plasma flare as the massive scrap dreadnought tore a violent hole in the upper atmosphere of Sector 9. The shockwave rattled the Imperial Academy's reinforced glass observation ports so hard that hairline cracks spiderwebbed across the diamond-paned windows. Inside the trembling command hall, High Prefect Vrax remained frozen. His 4 upper mandibles were twitching in a rhythmic, uncoordinated spasm, and his iridescent purple complexion had faded to a sickly, pale lavender. Below him, Clark Kale slowly lowered his head until his beak rested gently against his smoking terminal, refusing to look at the main viewing screen where the High Commandant's luxury cruiser was currently entering a fiery, terminal dive toward the acid-choked squall lines below. "High Commandant," Kale whispered, his voice trembling so badly the audio filter couldn't quite smooth it out. Should we initiate emergency pursuit protocols? Or alert the border fleet?" Vrax didn't answer immediately. He slowly reached out, grabbed a half-empty cup of cold nebula-tea from the obsidian desk, and stared into its murky, swirling depths as if trying to find the meaning of life at the bottom of a ceramic mug. "Kale," Vrax said softly, his voice utterly devoid of its former haughty arrogance. "Yes, sir." What was the name of the human protocol that Cadet General Vrax initiated? "Project Bastard, sir." Vrax closed his multifaceted eyes, letting out a long, shuddering sigh that sounded like a deflating hovercar tire. "Update the file, Kale, and change the classification." "To what, sir? High-risk containment, Class 4 threat." "No," Vrax whispered, opening his eyes and staring blankly at the empty space where the human's rolling junk pile had just vanished. "Change it to do not under any circumstances touch the janitor and cancel my afternoon schedule. I'm going to go lie down in the decontamination chamber." 5 parsecs away, floating comfortably in the calm, starlit expanse beyond the reach of Imperial radar, the makeshift cockpit of the Vandermeer hummed with the steady, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of an oversized diesel turbine chugging along on high-grade plasma moonshine. Arthur leaned back comfortably in his repurposed dentist's chair, propping his boots up on a freshly welded steel console that still bore a stenciled warning label, "Do not operate while intoxicated." He took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of his lukewarm coffee. Outside the scratched, triple-paned observation viewport, the galaxy stretched out in a breathtaking panorama of swirling nebulae and distant, twinkling stars. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And best of all, there wasn't a single pompous Imperial admiral in sight. A low, synthetic clicking sound drew his attention to the corner of the bridge. Mac, the battered mining droid Arthur had rescued from a nearby cargo wreck and wired directly into the ship's snack bar processor, rolled forward on squeaking casters, its single duct-taped blue optical lens blinking rhythmically. "Captain," Mac's synthetic voice rasped, the internal audio speaker crackling with faint static. "Long-range scanners indicate we are officially clear of Imperial jurisdiction. Furthermore, our current velocity of 4% of light speed is maintaining structural integrity. provided we do not hit any unusually large asteroids or aggressive space fauna. Arthur grinned, setting his coffee mug down on an empty soup can. "Good to hear, Mac," Arthur said, reaching over to tap a rhythm against the steering yoke, which was still connected to a pair of bicycle handbrakes and a tractor-beam lever. "How's the galley looking? Did we salvage any decent rations from that supply locker?" "Affirmative," Mac replied, his mechanical arm adjusting a blinking toggle switch. "We have 3 crates of nutrient paste, 6 liters of unrefined engine cleaner, and 1 package of freeze-dried chocolate ice cream left over from an Imperial supply drop." "Luxury," Arthur laughed, leaning back and lacing his hands behind his head as the 5-kilometer scrap titan rumbled steadily into the deep, uncharted dark of the outer rim. "Let him keep their pristine ships, their gleaming biosteel, and their fancy academies." He gave the steering yoke a casual, affectionate pat. "Out here, you just need a wrench, a little duct tape, and a whole lot of spite. Let's see what's over the next horizon." The steady, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the diesel hybrid turbine echoed pleasantly through the expansive, cavernous corridors of the Vandermeer. What used to be a sterile, terrifying instrument of ancient imperial destruction had been thoroughly converted into a rolling, floating masterpiece of blue-collar ingenuity. In Sector 12, which Arthur had officially designated the rec room and machine shop, the atmosphere was downright cozy. He had dragged a couple of weathered vinyl lounge chairs into what used to be the primary tactical briefing room, complete with a flickering, black-and-white cathode ray monitor playing a heavily degraded recording of an old 20th-century baseball game he'd found stored on a salvaged flash drive. Arthur kicked his boots up onto a low-slung table made from an upturned missile casing, taking a long, contemplative bite out of a square of freeze-dried chocolate ice cream. Beside him, Mac rolled to a halt, his single blue optical lens casting a steady, hum-filtered glow across the room. "Captain," Mac rasped, his internal cooling fan giving a brief, high-pitched whine. "I have been analyzing our long-range subspace antenna arrays. We are currently intercepting a wide-band public broadcast frequency originating from the nearby independent mining colony of New Oakhaven." Arthur chewed slowly, raising an eyebrow. "New Oakhaven? Aren't those the folks running those retrofitted ore barges we saw back near the nebula?" "Affirmative," Mac confirmed, projecting a fuzzy holographic text window into the center of the room. "Their public bulletin board is currently advertising an open market swap meet, offering trade goods, fresh coffee beans, actual coffee beans, Captain, not chicory, and hydraulic manifold gaskets in exchange for heavy escort or industrial towing services." Arthur stopped chewing. Real coffee beans, not the bitter, vacuum-sealed swamp water he had been forcing down for the last 3 weeks, but actual, roasted, aromatic beans. He stood up so fast, his metal lounge chair tipped backward with a loud clatter. "Mac," Arthur said, his eyes widening with absolute singular focus. "Drop our velocity to a quarter impulse. Plot a course for New Oakhaven." "Navigation locked, Captain," Mac replied, his mechanical joints clicking cheerfully. "Though I feel obligated to point out that towing heavy ore barges with a 5-kilometer scrap warship powered by tractor parts and plasma moonshine may draw some curious attention." Arthur grinned, grabbing his greasy mechanic's cap and settling it firmly on his head. "Let him look, Mac," Arthur laughed, heading toward the corridor that led to the bridge. "We've got the best plumbing in the galaxy, a ship built out of pure spite, and now we're going to get some real coffee." With a deep, resonant roar that rattled the stars themselves, the Vandermeer adjusted its course, its patchwork hull gleaming proudly under the distant nebula light as it sailed boldly toward the outer rim. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories. Hit the bell icon to stay updated on our latest uploads.